Welcome to the PRISM webinar, Prioritizing Your Goals, presented by Charles Rotblut, creator of the PRISM Wealth-Building process. My name is Jenna Brashear, and I want to welcome you to the first step of the AAII PRISM Academy. If you need assistance along the way, I can help you with anything and everything when it comes to interacting on the AAII community platform. So now that we've properly introduced ourselves, I want to showcase what today's presentation will be focused on. Today, we will be going over what the key components of your goals are, as well as how to implement them as you define your primary objectives. We will also delve into how the timing of your goals, such as how far away they are and their duration, play key roles in this process. And finally, how to determine the amount of wealth needed to fulfill each goal. And so I compiled a few statistics in the very beginning because I found them really interesting. But did you know that only 30% of Americans have a long-term financial plan? It's not a surprise that only around a quarter of Americans have a written financial plan, which means that they may not be prepared to fund emergencies or afford a vacation or pay for post-retirement costs. And lastly, in 2020, it was found that 32% of Americans have very little to nothing saved for retirement. So those are some frightening statistics, if I do say so myself. And so that's why we believe that starting the PRISM process with prioritizing your goals is so important as we begin to develop a clear financial plan to help you reach your future financial goals. And I just want to say, if you have any questions for Charles or I, after watching this webinar, you can feel free to send them to members@aaii.com so we can answer them promptly and get you the help you need. And a handout of the presentation, as well as the worksheets that we mentioned today, are all available in the AAII PRISM Academy library. All links to those resources we discussed will be in the YouTube description, as well as in the community itself. And for new viewers, we do like to give a little background about our organization. So the American Association of Individual Investors is an independent nonprofit corporation formed in 1978 for the purpose of assisting individuals in becoming effective managers of their own assets through programs of education, information, and research. And additionally, if you're new to the PRISM process or the Academy, I want to give you a little bit of information. So the PRISM Wealth-Building process is a 5-step course that provides investors with a framework for aligning their investment decisions with their goals. So following the 5 steps of PRISM empowers you to create a personalized investment plan and gives you the confidence to follow it. And if you're new and want to view the full syllabus of the online PRISM Academy, you can visit aaii.com/learningplan to get started. And we'll, of course, bring this up later at the end as well, so you don't forget. And I just want to also mention that the PRISM Academy is a free added benefit for all AAII members. So let's jump right in. The floor is yours, Charles.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, everybody, for watching. So as Jenna said, we're going to talk about goals and the importance of it. And key to the PRISM process is really the idea that it's goals driven, that goals drive all your investment decisions. And if you just step back at a high level and you think about it, if you need to, say, buy a car in 3 years, what you do with your money and how you actually set that money aside is different than, say, if your goal is to retire in 20 years. If you want to buy a car, say, in 3 years, you're going to put it to a savings account. You don't want to risk the money you need for a down payment. But if your goal is to retire, say, in 20 years, well, then you're thinking really heavily in stocks because you really want to grow that amount of money. And obviously, there's budgetary factors that play as well. Maybe for that car, you need to save more aggressively. For retirement, it's more of a long run, more of a marathon type savings where you're constantly doing it. So this is why we always start the PRISM process with goals, because goals ultimately determine all the other decisions you make. And so throughout this presentation, we're going to go over goals. We're really going to explain why they're so important and show you how they help influence other parts of your wealth building process. And as I said, the whole idea of PRISM is really as a framework for helping you reach their goals. So the idea of PRISM is you take your goals and then you build all your other decisions based on it. And when you do this, you find yourself being really empowered. You find yourself having clarity during volatile market conditions, particularly when you have bear markets like we currently are in as we film this. You don't have to worry about what the talking heads are saying, whether you need to be in stocks, whether you should be more conservative. Rather, you're thinking about what your goal is and how do I reach that goal? And I think you'll find out that if you adopt this type of thinking, investing becomes a lot easier. You have, again, a lot more clarity because you're really trying to hit that goal, hit that target, versus wondering what the market's going to do this week or next month. you're not thinking in those terms. It really shifts your time frame and really gets you thinking in terms of how far away is my goal? What do I need to achieve that goal? And then really psychologically and financially, how much risk can I take to achieve that goal? So it really gives you a lot of clarity throughout your investing process, not only from allocation, but even how you invest, what you put in your portfolio. And so goals really have a much larger impact than a lot of people give them credit to. To better understand PRISM, it's a 5-step process. It really starts again with prioritizing your goals, and then it goes into recognizing your risk tolerance and your allocation, identifying your investment management process, your investment management preferences, selecting and managing your investments, and finally monitoring your allocation, which might prompt you to, if your allocations is off track, might prompt you to reassess what investments you hold, or if there's been a change in either your goals or your life stages, that might cause you to go back and revisit step 1 and go through the process. So PRISM is really a lifelong living process. As your life changes, as your financial situation changes, and maybe perhaps after you achieve certain goals, your PRISM process gets updated. So it's not a one-time, I'll do this, I'm done. It's a process you'll constantly update throughout your life. It's a process you'll adapt as your life changes, because certainly the goals you have now may not be the same goals you have 20 or 30 years from now. Maybe even 5 years from now, your goals potentially could change. And so PRISM is designed to change along with you. And there's a big reason we start with goals. Not only is it that it gives you clarity and helps you define how you're going to invest, it also helps you prioritize what you're going to do. And there's a study out around New Year's of this year where they asked people, what resolutions do they set? And you can see on this list, financial goals was really high. In fact, people said setting the proper financial goals is more important than improving their relationships. Now, those people's significant others might have something to say about those survey results, but a lot of people said, hey, setting financial goals is really important. And focusing on those goals is really important. And that's great. But it's one thing to say, I'm going to focus on this goal. It's another thing to say, I'm going to take steps to achieve that goal. And the PRISM process is really about helping you take those steps to achieve those goals and making those steps part of your investment process. So we're not asking you to set a resolution, and maybe your resolution isn't a financial goal. Maybe your resolution instead is, I want to travel to Asia or to Europe. Well, it's the same type of thing. You can set that goal, but unless you're going to take steps to achieve those goals, you'll never realize that goal. And one of the first things you can do to actually achieve that goal, in fact, one of the most successful things you can do to achieve that goal, is to simply write it down. There's a study out of Dominican University where they actually looked at what steps people could take to achieve their goals. And people who did accomplish more goals, what did they do? And as you can see on this chart, people who simply wrote down what their goal was, say, my goal is to save more for retirement. My goal is to buy that house in Hawaii. Whatever it is, writing down those goals, if you simply just do that, you increase your odds of achieving them by at least 50%. Now, we could argue about the structure of this survey, about how they did the study, and whether or not it's completely relevant. But there has been a lot of research showing that if you simply write down your goal, if you tell somebody your goal. When I was young and I was racing bikes, I remember going to a training session, and there's a coach in front of the audience saying that, if your goal is to do a triathlon, your first step should be able to tell everybody that you're going to do a triathlon. And the reason why is because that automatically makes you accountable. You've set that commitment. And once you set that commitment, you're more likely to do it. And writing down, this is my goal, helps build that commitment, makes you more accountable, even if it's just to yourself. It makes you accountable for achieving that goal. So just having that accountability gets your mind in the right framework of what do I need to do. And I'm a big believer in this idea of writing things down. For instance, as we record this, I'm actually training for the Chicago Marathon. I'm going to be doing this in October with our marketing director, Peter Wynn. You can see in front of me, this is my training plan. The blue penmanship is actually what I've actually run. Every week I update this plan. I know at the beginning of each week, here's what I'm going to run. Here's what my long run on Saturday is going to be. And I stick to it. And just merely having this plan makes me accountable, but it also sets my mind frame up. Okay, what do I need to do this week? And I tailor my week around this. My wife knows that if I'm going to have a long run on a Saturday, I'm not going to want to stay up very late on Friday night, especially because my marathon training starts at the early hour of 6:45. But merely having this plan is going to help me reach that goal and hopefully set a personal best when I run the marathon in October. And again, very simple, but very effective. And never overlook the power of simplicity, and never overlook the simple power of writing down what you want to accomplish. It really does make a difference. And this is why when we developed the PRISM process, one of the first things I did was actually create a goal setting worksheet. And it's very simple, as you can see in front of me. What are your goals? How far away is the goal? How long are you going to spend on that goal? What's the priority? What's the estimated cost of it? And then any comments you have. And we'll go through all these components. But high level, if you think about things from a financial standpoint, you have a goal. And again, your goal might be something, that's really important to you, perhaps funding retirement, or perhaps if you're older, maybe paying for your grandkids' college education, or maybe you want to leave a lot of money to a charity, or perhaps it's you just want that sports car and you have your idea, you have your heart set on that high-end Tesla. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but that goal is something that's important to you and it's something you want to achieve. So write it down. And then think about, well, how far away is that goal? Is it something I can reach in the next couple of years? If it's something that I'm going to save over the course of a few decades, or is it something in between? Write that down as well, because that starts to set your mind frame for how am I going to invest? What type of allocation do I need? How long is my investing horizon? But we also added spending duration, because your goal might be a one-time spend. Maybe it is that around the world cruise, at which point, I'm going to make this date, I'm going to pay for that cruise. And on X date, the cruise is going to go over this period. I'm going to spend over this period. But perhaps your goal is, again, retirement. Well, then you're looking at a duration of how long your life will be in retirement. And you can make an estimate of that. If your goal is to leave an inheritance for, say, your heirs, well, then you can think about, okay, the first duration is how long is it till I pass and they get that duration. But then you can also think in terms of, well, how long do I want them to spend that money over? And maybe you're saying a trust that's going to give out the money over a period of years. Again, so once you hit your goal could go on for a while, and that has implications. Priority is pretty obvious. What goal do you have to choose, and what goal really matters to you, and what goals are more aspirational? Cost, because we're investing, how much is that goal going to cost you? And finally, we had a comments field. If there's some notes you want to leave to yourself, you can put it in there. And comments is whatever's important to you. But the idea is you're taking these goals and you're getting them out of your head and you're running them down. You're building that commitment. But you're also setting yourself a framework. Okay, I want to reach this goal. And to achieve this goal, I'm going to need X amount of money. And I estimate it's going to take me Y number of years to save for it. And if you just do those simple things, all of a sudden you really set yourself a framework for making all your other investing decisions, because you start set parameters for what type of level of risk you can take. You start thinking about, okay, savings, but you also might be thinking in terms of what your goal is, how you're going to save for it. Because certainly, if your goal is to save for retirement, you might be thinking about things like 401k, which means you might be investing in mutual funds. If your goal is perhaps, buy that vacation house in 20 years when you retire, so you have a second house when you retire. Well, maybe then you might be thinking more about IRAs, or perhaps, I want to save enough so I can take this really expensive trip when I reach this anniversary with my spouse. Well, then maybe you're thinking about brokerage account, which opens up the field of stocks. So you start seeing how these things actually influence a lot of your investing decisions. And that's why we built this, to help you set the basic framework for what you want to do with your investing. And so again, as I've been hammering this, the reason why PRISM starts with goals is that it brings you this clarity, starts bringing you this purpose, gives you the direction. And as I've been saying, whatever you set for your goals determines all really drives your other decisions. And so, as we talked about here, you can see on the slide the 5 key components. And as you look at those, you'll recognize those are exactly what I just showed you on the sheet. We just here label them out so you can actually see what they are in order. And it's pretty simple stuff. None of this is mind shattering, but it should, again, change your framework as far as how you approach investing. And so let's talk about goals. So what are my personal goals? Well, my number one goal is not to have to rely on cat food in retirement. So my number one goal is to fund retirement. I came from a middle-class family, as did my wife. Both our fathers worked for the government. And while we both had great childhoods, we're both responsible for funding our own retirement. So that's a major goal for me. I do want to maintain adequate emergency savings, but I also want to increase short-term savings so we can go on vacations. I need to buy new furniture. Obviously, at some point our cars will need repairs. So trying to build that buffer so I don't have to, say, use credit cards. And finally, I maintain a low splurge account. And this is exactly what it says, money if I want to be really frivolous with. So it's a separate account. And I do have that for savings. But again, in this case, it ranks last because if push comes to shove, I'm going to be more concerned with saving for retirement than I am for spending something that's kind of frivolous. And now, Jenna, you have your goals listed as well.
So when I went into, the PRISM Academy, I was, I would go through my goals as examples for people to emulate when they're thinking of, how to respond to a certain question, or just to get the kind of the thoughts going as they're also thinking about their own financial goals. So my top 4 financial goals that I prioritized was one, very similar to Charles, is fund retirement. So, thinking about those daily life expenses that it's one thing to think about retirement as a whole and to try to, but everything that goes into it, everything that you're used to, like Charles, you also mentioned, like the standard of living that you're already used to, continuing that also, or increasing that in during retirement. My second one is to pay for my parents' long-term care, end-of-life expenses if need be. So this is something, to help my parents out. They're usually, they're self-sufficient, and this is something that I would like to do kind of as a thank you to them, for paying for a lot of my expenses when I was younger. My third one is paying off a mortgage. I don't have a house right now, but this is something that I have to plan for. So those are also some of those goals that, you may not have right now, but this is something that you're going to have to prioritize later or very soon coming up. So I'm looking for a house. And so this is now on my list. And then my last one is fund travel expenses. So very similar to Charles's is, short-term savings, looking at going overseas. I know we saw a lot of those, people who wanted to go to specific countries or continents in the community. So that was great to see, a lot of similar goals, that people were thinking of. So yeah, those are my 4.
Great, Jenna. And I know you also want to share some goals from our members as well.
Yeah, it was great to see. One of our, I think lesson 1 was the most engaged this lesson in prioritizing your goals. So the first step of the course. So we got to see a lot of different member goals, and it was funny to see a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. But a few of them, just basically, I'll just call a couple out. But these are actual responses from the lesson 1 in community. So this is like, not outlive financial resources, be able to travel comfortably. Leave a financial legacy. We saw that a lot. Being able to support grandchildren, other family members, traveling. Yeah, like I said, specifically. So Italy, France, African safari, which sounds so much fun. Financially helping, 3 kids, relatives. That's just wonderful to hear. Some of the more practical ones, keeping up with inflation. That's something that, we're really being hit right now. That's very timely and on everybody's mind. And then, increase the value of your IRA. I'll just call it a couple more that I thought were really interesting, but, contributing to a church or, a volunteer organization. And then we even had some more high level, goals that people mentioned was like capital preservation or capital growth. So some people, they don't want to stop, at, retirement, they want to keep their portfolios growing or things like that. So it was great to actually see and hear from everybody in there. And if you have time, go in there and, contribute your own financial goals. We'd love to see them.
And I want to say, I'd love to go on an African safari too. That's a great goal.
That was my favorite one.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Oh
so,
yeah,
Jenna,
and
yeah.
yeah. So if you just go ahead and jump right into the community, there's a couple different ways that you can get there. If you aren't there already. So one, you can go and visit AAII.com/learn-and-plan, which is really easy way to just see what the framework is. The 5 steps of PRISM are listed there, as well as each individual lesson. So you can kind of get an overview of what each entails and jump in right there. And so all you have to do is when you visit the Learn and Plan page, you just go click on step 1, which is prioritizing your goals. You log into the PRISM Academy with your AAII credentials. And then you start with lesson 1 and continue on. I believe there's 1 through 7 for the first step under prioritizing your goals. And then it continues on, like Charles mentioned, into R, I, S, and M. So this is the first question. And so, yeah, you can go ahead and share your goals and see what other people, are also talking about.
Absolutely. And so let's just kind of go through these components a little bit. So the timing of goal, I've touched on this a few times, but it really is, when is the goal going to be reached? And the reason why we focus timing first, it really drives your allocation decisions. So again, going to the idea that you're going to need a car in say 2 or 3 years. Well, that's short term, and your goal is to preserve wealth because let's face it, cars are expensive. And if you need to make a down payment of X dollars, you don't want to have the market to suddenly drop at the same time your current car goes kaput. You want to make sure you have that money in short-term savings as cash or cash equivalents so that when you need to spend the money on a new car, it's there. You're not putting it at risk. But long-term goals require growth of wealth, as Jenna's talked about with preserving your purchasing power. You want to make sure your savings grow in excess of the rate of inflation. So not only do you grow your wealth, but also you're able to afford more. Because let's be honest, the cost of bread now is going to be a lot cheaper than it's going to be 10 years from now. And we're certainly in an inflationary environment right now, which erodes your purchasing power. So it's really important. The longer your goal is, the further your goal is to the future, the more important it is to get those higher returns. Now, once your goal is reached, if you're going to have a one-time purchase, then your goal is to really get really conservative. So say you have a kid that's, in high school and they're approaching college and you're planning on paying for just 4 years of college and hoping your kid gets through college in just 4 years. You want to make sure you want to start getting more conservative because you obviously, again, don't want to have a bear market hit a stock market right at the same time you need to write that tuition check. But say if your goal is ongoing and going back to this idea of retirement, the day you retire, say you retire at age 65 or 70. If you're in good health and have good genetics, you could be looking at 2 or 3 decades of lifespan, which means you have a long tail of spending. And in this case, you really need to think about maintaining that allocation to stocks so you can continue growing because you need your money to last you over a prolonged period of time. So this is where the timing of both aspects of goals come to play. How soon will it be reached? And once it's reached, how long will your spending continue? And as you can see, both of those impact your allocation decisions. And which is why I just said right here. So in both cases, it really affects your allocation, and your allocation obviously drives your investment decisions. If you have a very conservative allocation, you'll be selecting different types of investments than if you have a very aggressive allocation. So this is how it all starts building that framework I talked about. Now, your cost of goal, well, obviously from a financial standpoint, you want to think about, well, how much do I need to save? And if you don't know how much you need, you can make some rough estimates. So for instance, retirement, a rule of thumb is that it should be 70, 80% of your current spending. And now there's various retirement calculators. So if you're younger and retirement's still far away, there are various retirement calculators you can use to get an estimate of, well, how much will I need X years in the future? I will say their estimates vary, so use a few. But your goal is to try to get an estimate of how much will I need to save. And if you don't know what it is, do your best guess. Now, if it's a short-term goal, well, then you can make some reasonable estimates. So again, going back to the simplistic idea that you'll need a car within 2 or 3 years, you can look at current prices. Maybe you increase them by 10%. That'll give you a good ballpark number. But in retirement, the further out, if you're near retirement, you can look at your current spending. If retirement's a couple of decades out, you can use a retirement calculator, get an estimate. But even a rough estimate is better than no estimate. At least gives you a target to shoot for. And as you get closer to your goal, you can obviously reassess that target. And do realize whatever that number is, and particularly the goals far out in the future, don't be intimidated if it's a really massive number, because if it's a goal you're going to hit on date X, but your spending is going to go over a period of several years or decades, then you don't need that full amount at retirement, because you still have the date you hit the goal. You still have many years afterwards to continue funding that goal. So you want to think about in that scenario, how much will you need to spend over the first few years? And you want to keep that number. To give you a rule of thumb, think about your spending over the first 5 years. That should really be no more than 20% of your total what you have saved. But that still gives you a lot of growth going forward afterwards to grow. So even if the number is really big, realize you may not need that big number at the very date you hit your goal if you're going to have a long spending duration. Now, in terms of prioritizing your goals, this is where you really have your hard decisions, because you really want to think about what goals are non-negotiable, what goals do you have to hit no matter what, and what goals are more aspirational. And if you're a parent, this is where it really comes into play, because your goal might be, well, I need to fund my retirement, but I also want to help my children out with their college education. And with push comes to shove, you may have to really prioritize retirement. And I realize it's a very tough decision to make, but realize if your goal is not to be a burden on your children, that means you may have to have a discussion with your kids saying, you know what, I know you really want to go to this school, but I'm only able to help you out to Y amount. And that may mean you need to go to a lower cost school. And again, these are tough decisions to make, and they can lead to very tough decisions. But you really want to think about, if push comes to shove, what goals you're willing to let go, what goals are truly aspirational, so you can focus on those goals that are really important that you must meet. And again, it can be hard, but it allows you to really focus on, you're always better off hitting the most important goals versus trying to hit all goals. Now, if there are several goals you think are attainable, one thing you can think about is bucket strategies. So, and this really means splitting your savings to different accounts, and perhaps even your budget, so you have different dollar amounts going to different accounts. And it's really a mental strategy, but it might help you visualize your progress to each goal. And so this case, in PRISM, you might fill that first step one, that goal worksheet, as a single goal sheet. But then when you look at steps 2, 3, and 4, which cover your allocation, your investment management preferences, and your investment strategies, then perhaps you fill out steps 2, 3, and 4 separately for each goal. So you basically have different strategies for achieving for different goals. And that mentally, that helps different people visualize what goals they're trying to hit, as well as their progress towards the goals. So if that strategy works for you, please do so. And then once your goals are set, then you can go through your next steps. So let's go through the example of college. So if your goal is college and your kids are young, then you realize you want to allocate pretty aggressively to stocks to grow that money. If your kids are in high school, you want to start getting more conservative, because obviously you don't want that bear market to hit when you have to write that tuition check. In terms of investment management preferences, if you're saving through a 529, then you might be tied to using funds, and the funds specifically that are offered through that 529 plan. If you're saving through a brokerage account, then you can consider things, stocks, possibly ETFs. So that alters how you invest. And then step 4, obviously, is then what specific investments are you going to choose? And again, a 529 plan, you might be very limited in what investments you can choose, choosing from the funds that are offered in that specific plan. Versus if you're using a brokerage account, then you can use your choice of funds, mutual funds, ETFs. You have a wider choice of investments to choose from. And whichever case, you do want to make sure you set rules for each goal, rules for how you're going to select those investments, which we get into in the PRISM process. But you can see here how the goals really kind of help you give clarity to your other investing decisions. And we have worksheets throughout the PRISM process to help you work through these decisions to help make those decisions for you. And what I will say here, Jen, I'll let you talk about this, but once your goals are set, then you can start going through the rest of the PRISM process with step 2 in the PRISM Academy. Jenna, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah. Yeah, we have countless lessons on step 2, which you can go through interactive worksheets. We have spreadsheets. We also have if you can go in and participate in those discussions. We have prompts for every week that are available. You can also see what other people when they followed along when we were going through it initially. You can see what they've commented, what they found that their risk tolerance was, how did that affect their allocation. If you read through some of the responses, they're very some of the members were, I knew for sure that I was an aggressive investor, with aggressive risk tolerance, and then they start thinking about it and reevaluating after their goals are set, and they're now seeing that it's not that they're actually more of a conservative or that they're more moderate. So it's really interesting to see those, connections being made and people understanding that, this is why we have, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So you can go through and actually think through each process, and it's almost like a domino effect because it really does rely on each other. So yeah, you can always you can jump into step 2. I'll have all of the links in the description, so you'll be able to access that right from the presentation.
Great. And you want to tell them about community?
Yeah, so if you haven't really delved into the AAI community and this is your first time, it's a really interactive platform that you can that we can use to really build your financial plan and understand what needs to be done still. So you can join us in the PRISM Academy to complete step P, prioritizing your goals. And then you can participate in online discussions. You can delve into the worksheets like we talked about. There's countless other resources. We have even a PRISM resource guide that you can flip through. It's like a PDF that you can if you, let's say you delved a little bit in step 1 and you just want to take a look at what everything else has to offer, that's a great resource. But yeah, if you can either visit the community by going to community.aaii.com, or you can go through that aaii.com/learn and plan. Either one works.
Great.
And I think there's one more slide. So I just wanted to show you what the PRISM Academy syllabus looks like. So when you go into the AAI community and you go onto the homepage of PRISM, you'll see the right graphic. And so it actually builds out each link for each lesson that we have available. And so we have lessons that you'll click on that, because it takes you right to the discussion. There's worksheets in there. It shows you which worksheets pertain to each lesson, so you don't get lost or confused which one's which. And then we also have each webinar. So you once you've finished watching this webinar, you can delve into step 1, go through the discussions. It'll prompt you to go into the worksheets, and then you'll go on and watch step 2 webinar, and so on.
Absolutely. And so as we tell, a lot of the worksheets we talked about, as Jenna said, are available in the PRISM Academy. We walk you through each step so you have a better understanding how the process works. And I strongly recommend it. And you also get a chance to interact with other members as well and see how they're using that PRISM approach. It's a great learning experience. And we both encourage you to do it. And again, just to go back with the PRISM process, and we just talked about, the next step is recognizing your risk tolerance and allocation. But as I said at the beginning, this is an ongoing process. So you don't just go through all 5 steps and you're done. It's designed to evolve as you go along. And so if you look at this, you jump down to the very bottom where it says monitoring. Once you achieve your goals, or once you find your goals change, PRISM actually prompts you to go back to that sheet we showed you earlier about reprioritizing your goals. So not only does it help you reach your goals, but as your goals change and your life changes, this process will change with you. So I think if you go through it, I think you'll actually find it's pretty intuitive, and it will give you clarity and help you really go further along in terms of achieving your goals. Great. And obviously, as Jenna said, for more information, we can go to ai.com, learn and plan, or community.aai.com.
Yeah, and Charles and I are here to help. So
Absolutely.
like I said, you can always message us at members@aai.com, or you can just contact us on the AAI community, and we're happy to help you answer any of the questions you may have, about worksheets or lessons or just big concepts that we're discussing. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks all for joining us. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I wanted to say a big thank you to Charles for delving into the importance of prioritizing your financial goals, understanding how to effectively plan for them, as well as why it's crucial to write them down. Because I think a lot of people, like I said earlier, we both had statistics on the fact that how important it is to write those down. So just understanding that portion. But I just wanted to also say, before we wrap up, I want to highlight that the AAI community platform isn't just the PRISM Academy. So we have countless special interest groups on various investment topics, such as the retirement withdrawals, income investing, allocation strategies, as well as your local AAI chapters, all in one online community platform. So you can go in and join different groups and kind of peruse through that community platform. And then, make sure always to log in using your AAII member credentials. So there'll be a big blue login button on the right, top right of your screen, and then it'll take you right in since it's an integrated interactive platform. And then we also have the PRISM Academy community library. That's where you're going to find all your worksheets, all your resources, archive of webinars, or other video resources that Charles was was able to build out for us early on when we were developing the PRISM Academy. So I want to make sure that everybody takes advantage of that as well. So, but yeah, with that, we wish all of you viewing good health, good fortune, and a great rest of your day. So thank you, Charles, and take care.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, everyone. Bye.